It is about education. Any trade you talk about should always be considered as non-funded. Trading does involve risk, so we want to try and limit that as much as we can. And of course, Freedom Management Partners personnel are not subject to trading restrictions. So let's see, let's pull this out of the way and look at the old calendar. Of course, we've got our inner circle on Mondays per usual. Next Monday, right after that, we've got Trading You at 8 o'clock on the 9th. And then we've got Mastermind Group on Tuesdays, per usual. Let's see, we got Q&A with Brandon for his SPX cash flow secrets on the 11th, which is next Wednesday. And then we've got the next Power Option Plays core training on June 16th, which will be a week from Monday. So that'll be after that'll be 8 o'clock after our inner circle. Of course, we've got Power Hour on Mondays. We've got this Trading Coaches Playbook on Fridays. And still left on the agenda next week is Tony's free class, Trading Signals. We've got one on the 11th and one on the 12th. And what I like to call the greatest hits, Pop, E-Mini Think Tank, and Covered Call Explorer. And then, not to be forgotten, all the social media platforms where you can find the cool free stuff from Wealth Builders HQ. So definitely go check it out. Here we go. As I mentioned in the calendar, we got Trading Signals, the Trader's Edge. So free training from Tony. Cool stuff. Definitely go check it out. Trying to get my phone out of my line of sight so it doesn't distract me. How many people get distracted by their phone? All right. So we will start as we usually start with me. Do a little review of the SPX and the VIX. So let me pull up my morning screen, which has all of the different. I think I've shown this before. If not, these are the futures. These are the indexes in the middle and the ETFs at the bottom. The first column is SPX. Second column is the Dow. Third column is NASDAQ. Fourth column is the Russell 2000. Don't worry about this one. So let's take a look at the old SPX. Let's start off with a daily. And of course, we've got our run up and our retracement and coming back up, trying to figure out what we're going to do here. We had this little, as Rob calls it, the old box of neutrality, or the dreaded box. Oops, sorry, dreaded box of neutrality. So that's it ish. Maybe pull this up just a little bit. So we, the last 3 days we've tried to break out and can't quite stay out. Today we have broken out, so maybe we'll take a step up. We'll see. You know what how the saying goes: trade what the market gives you, not what you. Don't say the T word. Think. Remember. Oh, hold on. I bought these the not too long ago, and I haven't used them yet, but I don't know if you can see. Well, it's reversed. It says trade what you see, not what you think. So, all right. Anyway, enough with the yeah, that Tony and I are kindred spirits. Squirrel. Anyway, so yeah, what is it gonna do? Well, let's see what it's gonna do. It will tell us. It's staying above the averages, so it's bullish. Um, for the eight, this is an 8 and a 13. Let's see. I think, do I have? No, it's 8 and 21. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I thought. So I don't have a 55 on here. So let's do moving average exponential, add selected, settings, 55. We'll leave it blue. That's fine. Nothing else is blue. So there you go. So now we've got our 55 on there, and that is true bullish. Price above the 8, 8's above the 21, 21's above 55. So that's what we can expect the bias to be. Obviously, anything can happen. But yeah, we're kind of beginning the summer doldrums. You hear the old saying, "Sell in May and go away." Not necessarily always true, but we do seem to be in a little bit of that sideways motion right now. So yeah, just watch what you're doing. And then of course we've got the old VIX. Um, I don't have that connected. Um, and of course we had the big spike way back, and then we got the tariff spike, and we're just kind of hanging out. What are we, 16.9? So we finally got down into that the top part of the bottom third, which is good for sellers, much better for sellers. I like it up in the low 20s because that makes it good for sellers and buyers, which is great for diagonals, which we do in Covered Call Explorer. Also great for iron condors, which we do an iron condor on the rut in Covered Call Explorer. So anyway, I definitely like it a little bit higher, but people that are doing strictly directional trades probably like it a little bit even farther down than it is right now, because that makes the options a little bit cheaper to buy. So yeah, anyway, I always want to watch the old SPX and the VIX to get an idea of what is happening and maybe see if you can identify some patterns that might signal something to come in the future. All right. So let's start into the presentation, the lecture of the day. And this one is going to be a little bit more of a lecture, but it's important stuff. And it may not seem like we're going to talk about that this relates as much to trading, but I will kind of put it all together. And what I'm going to do here is this is the beginning of a series. So I'm going to do, and this is kind of just the beginnings of it. And those of you in Inner Circle and Mastermind, you've seen this before. You know what this is coming up. Let's see. There's Norman, there's Kevin, Joe. See some names that definitely have seen this before. And for those of you that haven't, this is all about globalization. So, what is globalization? Of course, you know I love the obligatory definitions. And I like to make fun of some of the definitions, like the definition of globalization is the act or process of globalizing. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Anyway, to make worldwide in scope or application. Okay, that's a little bit more helpful. Of, related to, or involving the entire world, applied to the whole. So you get the idea. And what we're really talking about is this right here, involving the entire world. And it's about trade, not particularly trading, but trade. Hey, Brenda. And so let's take a look at it. So, what is globalization? So, this is a little bit dry, but let me get through this and we'll get into some really cool stuff. And then we'll look at how it can help us in trading. And then we'll look at some candidates at the end. So, globalization is the spread of products, technology, information, and jobs across national borders and cultures. In economic terms, it describes an interdependence of nations around the globe fostered through free trade. And any of you that know anything about me, you know I'm a big proponent of free trade. Love free trade. Uh, Whoever can do it the best and the cheapest should be who's doing it, whatever it is, right? Um, it describes the growing interdependence of the world economies, cultures, populations, cross-border trade in goods and services, technology, and flow of investments, people, and information. So there's a lot of different pieces to it. From a corporation standpoint, it can help you gain a competitive advantage by reducing your operating costs, by maybe buying materials a little bit cheaper, and also by gaining access to millions of new customers. And we'll talk about the history of it in a little bit, and we'll get into some of that. And it really is a phenomenon. It's not just about trade. We're going to talk mostly about trade, but it can also be social, cultural, political, legal. So yeah, where you are interacting, where you are exchanging ideas, politically and legally, you've got the UN, you got the WTO. And of course, when you are doing globalized trading, international trading, you have to take into account the laws in other lands. So, anyway, all right, a little bit more on what is globalization from the Peterson Institute of International Economics. Globalization is the word used to describe the growing interdependence of world's economies, cultures, and populations. This was from same as from the slide before. I like what Investopedia kind of goes into it a little bit deeper. Globalization being the spread of products, technology, information, and jobs across national borders. Uh, you know, it can create new jobs and economic growth through cross-border flow. The growth and job creations are not distributed evenly, but of course, you can have what you'll see is maybe a company, corporation has its factory here in the United States. And then it realizes, hey, I can take that textile manufacturing from the United States down to Mexico, get it done just as well, if not better, for cheaper. So let's do that. From a corporate standpoint, from a stockholder's standpoint, that is very good. From the person that was working in that factory in the United States, not so much, right? So you got to take that into consideration. The motives are idealistic as well as opportunistic. So there's the opportunistic side of we want to take advantage of that cheaper labor. But the development of a global free market has benefited large corporations based in the Western world. It's also helped those countries. So you've got third world or maybe developing countries that get these new industries, these new factories, all these new jobs, and it can help lift their standard of living. So and that's how you go from being a third world country to a developing country to a developed country. Those are kind of those are the three stages. Although technically third world country is something that came out of the Cold War, but we won't go in that. We won't go down that rabbit hole. So let's look at how modern globalization began. So we'll start back way back in the day of imperialism. So we've had tons of empires throughout world history, right? The Egyptians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Ottomans. More recently, we have the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, the Dutch, and then the British, and then, of course, the United States. But the United States is not really an empire, is it? So the first window of globalization started in the 19th century when you started to add things like steamships and railroads and telegraphs, and things started to connect and become closer. Of course, that was interrupted by the First World War, the Great War. Then came protectionism after that. Then, maybe because of that, came the Great Depression. Of course, right after the Great Depression came World War II. So you've got Japan and Germany and Italy against the United States and Britain and France and Russia, more or less. There were actually 40 plus countries involved in all that. So, awful, awful thing, but it was the next step. So, as the war began to end in July of 44, there was a meeting at a ski lodge in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. And it was for the negotiations of the post World War II monetary and financial structure. What are we going to do next? The main U.S. representative was Harry White. The main British representative was John Maynard Keynes. Anybody know him? Ever heard of Keynesian economics? So they put this together and brought all of the allies together to talk about this and make some agreements. Part of that initial meeting what came out of that was the International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which became the World Bank. Another part of the agreement was that all currencies were to be pegged to the dollar, which would be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Okay, and as it progressed after the war was over into the late 40s and even the early 50s, you had the United Nations, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. Things began to come from this, build on this to foster this more international trade and globalization is really what it became. Now, when everybody came here, they all expected the United States to say, okay, we're now the next empire, and this is how things are going to go. But what they really got was all these other ideas on top of um, what else? Well, how about some free trade? So the United States was basically the only the only land that was completely unscathed from the war. So our markets were intact. We were the only one with a navy, really, after the war was over with. So the United States said, here's what we're going to do. We will allow everyone access to the United States market free and clear. We will protect all shipping, especially maritime shipping. And to do that, that will allow anybody to go anywhere and get any material and take it anywhere and make it into anything and then take it anywhere to sell it. That's kind of the overarching idea behind it all. Okay, that sounds really good. Now, of course, part of that agreement of pegging everything to the dollar, and it was very obvious that the United States was the controlling entity of it all. And so a few of the allies dropped out, notably, of course, the Soviet Union. So then it became another part of the agreement was a strategic military umbrella, including nuclear, which the United States, were the only ones to have at the time. But to get all of this, there was a caveat. What's the price of admission? So the price of admission for getting all this cool stuff was that the United States got to set your security policy, i.e., your side in the Cold War. And most everybody went along with it. So, we started 42 of the 44 allies from World War II. Then a little bit later, West Germany was added and Japan was added. When India became independent, they came along in the 50s, and then Sweden, Argentina, Indonesia, and many, many more, all the way up until Nixon visited China in 1972. And that was part of his visit, was to bring China into this agreement because they were not part of it right after World War II. So then everything began to change, right? So Nixon removed us from the gold standard in 1971. Technically, that was the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement because that was part of the main agreement. But everybody kind of just kept on doing what they were doing even after that. Of course, then you've got the Soviets' Iron Curtain falls in 89, German reunification. You've got the Soviet Union collapse in 1991, which created the Russian Federation, along with 14 newly independent nations. And basically everybody in that joined the new free trade world in some degree or another. So now we've got almost everybody along for the ride. And we are going into what became the most profitable as well as productive 30 years of mankind. So, I'm not sure. Oh, oops, that one didn't get caught up in that. Anyway, so for the next 30 years, you've got the expansion of free trade. You've got all these things going on. But in the 90s, people began to say, well, what's the next iteration of this global order? And, you know, I think we had maybe one of the most qualified people to lead us into that world in George H.W. Bush, whether you agree with him politically or not. He had all the prerequisites because he had been in so many different places in the government and understood global affairs. And so, since he was the most qualified to do that, we fired him. Uh, and the United States continued on with the next 4, 5 presidents, all being less and less global. They all wanted to be um, um, domestic presidents. Now, in one degree or another, you're always going to get dragged into something international, and they all did. But what you saw through this past the 90s and as you got up towards 2015, which was kind of the end of the 30 years from 1985 to 2015, you've got this continued industrialization and urbanization of developing countries. So they're all making more stuff and coming into the global order. But you see, because these presidents are more interested in domestic affairs, they began to slowly back away from this global security. So we're really seeing a lot of it now, but it began back in the 90s. So the interdependence, everybody know what JIT is, just in time manufacturing, where basically you're making things as they're ordered and shipping them out. And the globalization of trade allowed for a lot of that, and a lot of that was happening. And the global supply chains became increasingly intertwined. Most productive time in history, as I said a little earlier. There you go, Kevin. Until what happened? The beginning of the end, COVID-19, where we began to see what happens when even small pieces break in this very entwined system. We had supply chain breaks, we had shortages, we had lockdowns, we had all kinds of different things. And we began to see how fragile this system could actually be. So now what? One of the economists I follow, his name is Peter Zion. I've got some references at the end to give you more if you want to go even deeper, but he calls it the new disorder. And this is where we're headed. Most economists believe that we're at least headed into a different model. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of economic policy and economics in general is struggling right now because we don't have models for this. Um, you know, you hear Rob say it a lot. If you can trade this market, you can trade any market. And it's because things are so different and we're still kind of feeling our way through it and trying to get through it. All right. So I've picked 4 sectors or subsectors that are very important to what's going to happen next. There's more, but I've picked 4 to start with. And I don't know that we're not going to get through all of them today, but I'll lay them out and then we'll start to go into them a little bit and we'll see how far we get. We might get through them. I don't know. And yeah, definitely feel free to throw your questions in there and I'll do my best to answer them. But of course, we start with food. It's important, you know. Everything else is kind of a wash if you don't have good water, good food, good air, right? So, when it comes to food, what we're really talking about is not just the food. We're talking about water. We're talking about fertilizer. We're talking about crop switching. So, we're talking about technologies used for growing food as well as inputs that go into that. Let's see. So we've got next is energy, and energy is big. Oh, we got 2 of them there, didn't we? Okay, sorry. My PowerPoint skills are a little lacking right now. Anyway, so we've got energy, which encompasses all kinds of things. Of course, oil and natural gas, of course, coal. We've got new green tech. You're seeing more nuclear, even though people are afraid of it. There's not really a reason to be that afraid of it with new technologies, but it is what it is. And then, of course, there's probably who knows what sort of energy technologies are on the horizon that we don't even know about yet. So, that's the next piece. And then, of course, semiconductors. It's all the rage, right? You've got, the big players in China and Taiwan and South Korea, but you've also got Japan and the United States. And I threw neon on there because everybody know what neon is. It's one of the noble gases. I did not know until I started doing research for the original presentation when I did this a few years ago, how important neon is to the manufacture of semiconductors. And what it is it's used in the focusing of the etching lasers when you make integrated circuits. So anyway, pretty important. And then the last one is steel. So with steel, you've got several different kinds. You've got recycled steel, which is what we use mostly in the United States. You've got the input to make steel, which is crude iron. A lot of people know it as pig iron. And you need pig irons to manufacture virgin steel. So the biggest difference between recycled steel and virgin steel is that recycled steel is kind of ugly. So if you're making supports for the wall inside a building, it doesn't really matter. If you're making the outside of the building, then you're going to have to use virgin steel because you want it to look nice. Um, One interesting fact, pig iron is not made in the United States right now. Now, I don't know that if that has changed. I know that it should change, but just even a year or so ago, if not 100%, a huge, overwhelming majority of all the pig iron used to make virgin steel in the United States was imported. And then, of course, we're also importing virgin steel. And you've all heard about the new tariffs on steel and all the other stuff that's kind of jumbling up all this, as well. The new variables to this equation that are being added with all of the tariffs and the trade deals and this and that and the other. So again, where are we going to land? Who knows? So let's take a little bit deeper look at food. So like I said, we've got water, fertilizer, and crop switching as our main topics here. For water, we've got to worry about climate change. Some people, you know, I'm not I'm not in the camp that it's a horrific thing that going to make the world end in 5 years, like some people are. But I'm also not on the side of it's a myth and doesn't exist. I like to land somewhere in the middle, as I do on most issues. So, but it's something that's got to be taken into account because if the globe gets warmer, that water is going to be in the sky instead of on the ground. It's not going to go out into space, but it's not going to be usable. So then you've got to also look at your sources of water. So you've got rivers, you've got oceans, which can't give you water for food unless you go through desalinization and take the salt out of it, which I knew was kind of expensive, but didn't realize how expensive it really. I mean, it's super expensive. So that's why you don't see a lot of it here in the United States. Of course, we also have a great river system, so don't need it as much as maybe other places like Saudi Arabia, where you see more of it. And then, of course, you've got your reservoirs, where you've got your water table, and you drill a well into the water table and bring the water up. What we're running into now, especially in places like California, they're having to drill like thousands of feet down into the earth to get water. And basically they're just emptying the water table, which can be dangerous. If any of you have ever seen any of those pictures, there used to be a ginormous lake in the middle of the Central Valley in California, and it's all but gone. And that's because there's a lot of agriculture that goes on there, and they've used a lot of this water for irrigation, which is one of the primary inputs for food. Of course, the other thing is when you start drilling these wells, you start getting into rights infringements and arguments because in some cases you can actually be sucking the water out from underneath your neighbor, which is not friendly, right? So these are just some of the things that have to be considered when you're looking at water, which is pretty important, right? Got to have it to drink, got to have it to make food. So yeah, another one of the inputs is fertilizer. This one was very interesting. So the three major inputs from the fertilizer standpoint are nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium, otherwise known as potash. So you see where nitrogen comes from a lot of different places, China, Russia, India, the US. That's basically petrochemicals. That's a petrochemical process. So it's all about oil and natural gas. Then you've got phosphates. Phosphates are mined, and as you see, China, US, Morocco, Russia, and Tunisia. So phosphates can be very important. The thing about phosphates is I didn't realize the timeline to increase phosphates is very, very long. You don't just go dig a phosphate mine. It takes like 6, 7, 8 years to get one to where it's even producing. So you got to be careful of that. And then the big one is potassium, potash. Because notice Canada, Russia, Belarus, China, Israel. The United States is not on that list. We get a large amount of our potash from Canada, but Russia and Belarus together are close to, if not over, 50% of the world potash resource. And as we all know, there's lots of geopolitical things going on over there that are not good and causing problems. So we're lucky because we have a neighbor to the north that can help us out, but the rest of the world, not as much, right? So it's just another one of those things. And this is one where we can really start to look at opportunities to trade with companies like Mosaic, MOS, CF Industries, um, Nutrien, NU, oh no, NTR. So there's several different places, obviously, and then you can get into the oil and gas for the nitrogen as well. And then you've got crop switching. So you've got to worry about your fertilizer because sometimes if you use too much fertilizer, you lose the wrong fertilizer, it affects the soil. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat that, Brenda. Anyway, we've got a new, not really new, but a coming into focus again idea is regenerative agriculture. And I am a big fan of this because if you've ever been to a farm that is using regenerative agriculture and maybe is next to a farm that is not, just look at the ground. The regenerative farm, the ground is black almost, and the non regenerative farm might be tan. If you're lucky, it's brown. So, and that's where you get into rotation. You get into using animals for what they're supposed to be used for, which is to allow them to graze and to let all of their bodily functions make all the soil really nice and fertile. So, yeah, a lot better way to do it. It ends up being more cost effective, even. So, we're seeing more of that. Hopefully, we will continue to see more and more of that. The biggest another one of the biggest things is calories. How do people get their calories? So many people in this world get their calories from wheat and corn and rice, which, you know, take your nutrition advice from someone else, but that is not how I want to get my calories. Not a majority of my calories anyway. I'm a big protein fan. We'll just leave it at that. But some people can't do that. A lot of countries, a lot of people in a lot of countries don't have a choice. They have to get what they can get, or get what they can make, get what they can plant. And so you do what you can to increase the number of calories that you can make available to yourself, which obviously is not a problem in developed countries, especially this one, as I'm a proud example. But and then the other piece is feed. What are you feeding those animals? Hopefully, it's something really, really good, but that's not always the case. Um, and I'm a big believer in I like beef and I like grass fed beef, but that can get expensive. Some people just can't afford that. But you've also got I'm also a big fan of non-farm, non-domesticated animals like deer and boar and elk, and the more exotic type things. And if you've ever had any of it, it tastes really, really different. The nutrition values are really, really different. There you go, wild caught fish. Exactly. Something, put a line in the water and catch it. Don't buy it at the store. Don't buy it from someone who gets it off a farm from a fish standpoint. It's a matter of I don't want to go too deep down the nutrition rabbit hole, but it's a matter of there's a lot of choices out there, and you need to pick the choice that works best for you. Just like trading, you want to pick the choice that works best for your style and your risk profile. You knew I was going to say that, right? I throw that into just about everything, every presentation I do. So anyway, so the next one we're going to talk about is energy. So, like I said, we've got several pieces to the energy group. Oil and natural gas, you get a lot from the United States and Canada, the Middle East, Russia, Venezuela, and South America. So, there is oil a lot of different places. It's a lot easier to get in some places than others. Like they say, in Saudi Arabia, you can just kick the sand and it just comes up out of the ground. Now, that's obviously an exaggeration to some degree, but it is close to the surface and there is a lot of it. Now, of course, a lot of people don't realize the biggest oil reserve in the world is, who can tell me? Venezuela. Now, it is dirty. They call it sour. You've got light and heavy, and then you've got sweet and sour. Those are kind of the two pieces to oil. A lot of the stuff in Saudi Arabia is light and sweet. All the stuff, or not all, but a majority of the stuff in the United States is light and sweet. Most of the stuff in Venezuela is heavy-ish and sour, which means it has a lot of sulfur in it. So it's just a different, when you go to make that oil into products, it's a different process, usually more complicated process. The more sour it is, probably the more intricate the process. So anyway, as you can see, it's all over the world. Obviously, we're trying to get more into the green tech, solar, wind, batteries. The problem with green tech right now, I'm a big believer in green. I just also am a big believer in math. And I got this from Zion, from Peter Zion. The math doesn't work yet. You can't do solar energy in Germany because the sun doesn't shine there. Now, if you put a solar farm in Texas, West Texas, you can get a lot of energy. So that's a good place for it. If you put a wind farm in Iowa, you're going to get a lot of energy from it. So that's a good place. So you kind of have to pick and choose. You can't just say green tech everywhere and it's going to be that way forever because it doesn't work everywhere. But the places where it does work, it can work really, really well. Of course, then you get into what do you do with the power once you've generated it? Battery technology is not really up to snuff yet. Hopefully, it'll get there. We need some help in the material side as well as how they're built. But the other thing is high capacity power lines because people don't want windmills and solar panels next door to them. They want them way off where you can't see them or hear them. So then you got to bring that power into where the people are, even if you bring it in to put it into a battery. So that's another one of the infrastructure things that has to change for green tech to work. It can work, it's just not ready for prime time yet, in my opinion. And then you've got coal. People don't like it, but there's different types of coal. There's different usages for coal, and that's one of the things a lot of people talk about. Drive your electric car because you're helping climate change. In actuality, you're not, because most of that electricity is generated with coal. So anyway, but the coal in the United States is much cleaner than it is in most other places in the world. And then you go back up here to natural gas, which is, if you have to do fossil fuel, natural gas is the cleanest. So there's a lot of different, it's like everything else. It's like your nutrition, it's like your life, it's like your trading. There are trade-offs everywhere. You have to pick, you have to choose. And of course, maybe we want to get rid of coal, but maybe we can't get rid of it just yet. And then you've got other third world countries, developing countries, they can't afford to do green tech. They have to use coal. So you get into some of those ideas as well. And then, of course, there's nuclear, which really is cleaner. And with modern technologies, it is very safe. I think if we're going in the where we are headed with ginormous data centers and artificial intelligence and all of this other technological stuff, I think nuclear is necessary. So we'll see. Yeah, that's a good question, Brenda. Brenda's like, so if you're driving an EV powered by coal, what are the physical hazards to the body? And it depends. That's the answer to all questions. But the what it depends on is where is that electricity being created and what kind of coal is using it. Like they're using lignite in Germany because they shut down all their nuclear plants, which is the one of the dirtiest coals. It's very wet, so it puts up a lot of smog. Whereas the coal in the United States is very hard. It's like it's rock. So that's what makes it burn a little bit clean. Now, I'm not by any chance saying that it's clean because it's not, but it's cleaner. So there you go. But yeah, I think nuclear is the answer. We're going back to the 60s. But the problem is we've got everything that we have up to this point is from the 60s. So it's old. New technology is better. I really like the idea of modular nuclear, which are very small nuclear power cells that can run a small town or even a subdivision, and you could put them together to run an office complex in a cityscape. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. Yeah, and that's there you go. So Brenda's saying that says that because she worked in the nuclear field and was a safety rep that tried to protect the workers from health hazards. And there's definitely hazards there. I think the biggest hazard we have in the United States right now is that all of our stuff is so old. I think if we put the money into the infrastructure to improve our power lines and make new nuclear plants, preferably smaller modular nuclear plants, I think that could help. But that is my opinion. And we all know what that's worth, right? All right, so here's the one that we all know and hear about a lot about recently with semiconductors, and they run the world, right? Um, we're running into things where, like in when we had our supply chain breaks from COVID, they were not able to make things like automobiles because they couldn't get solved enough semiconductors to do what needed to be done. What there's like multiple hundreds of semiconductors in a single automobile, a sedan. I'm not talking about, a big one. Um, so anyway, we'll start with China, where we start everything, and of course, Apple is the big name there, although Apple is moving to India. So we'll see how long that lasts. And then, of course, the news article du jour, rare earth elements. I did actually see something yesterday, an interview with the governor of West Virginia, where they were talking about they have found good amounts of rare earth elements in water in abandoned coal mines in West Virginia. Okay, well, maybe we won't be digging for coal, but we'll be digging for rare earth elements. And of course, we have to have those for all of the big tech that we have. In particular, what we're hearing about a lot now is the magnets that are necessary for a lot of the mechanical things, whether it's industrial machines or consumer automotive. We need those magnets to create those electromagnetic fields that make things run. One thing to worry about when it comes to China, and you'll see this a lot if you go any deeper into Peter Zion stuff. Number one, the authoritarianism is not helping. Xi is basically a cult of personality. People are afraid to give him even good news because they don't know how he'll react. And then you've got demography, and you'll see that a lot coming up in some of the next iterations of this series. But the demographics of China are awful, and they get revised down every year. I mean, there's a lot of that data that they just don't collect because it's bad. Not they don't share it with anybody, they don't collect it at all. So, you'll hear people say that China is the next great power. You'll hear other people say China is on the verge of collapse. As per usual, I'm somewhere in the middle. But yeah, still something to be considered. And then, of course, you've got Taiwan, things to be considered with Taiwan. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor. Um, most of the if not all of the middle range chips come out of TSMC, as well as many of the high end chips. Now, you'll also see high end chips coming from Japan, South Korea, and the United States. What comes out of China, though, is mostly low end, maybe a little bit of middle end. The things that make your toaster sing to you, the Internet of Things. But then the other consideration is the one China policy. What is going to happen with Taiwan? Nobody knows. So it's a little bit volatile, right? Then you've got North Korea, South Korea. Let's see, North Korea, where make a lot of Android phones, things like that, a lot of computers, a lot of tech, semiconductors, but also they have a very bad demographic problem. The countries you're going to have to watch out for from a demographic problem standpoint are China, Japan, South Korea, and Germany and Italy. Those are the big economies that have very bad demographic issues. Now, others have it as well. Russia has it as well. Um, you know, but the ones that don't have it as much, Turkey, Argentina, the United States. So, it's what it boils down to is when did they industrialize, which causes urbanization, which causes lower birth rates, and when they like our baby boomers had kids, known as millennials. A lot of other countries, the baby boomers didn't have kids or didn't have that many. Brenda, what do you mean by issues? I mean things causing problems. I mean manufacturing or industries shutting down because they don't have any workers, or they don't have enough workers. Um, you're seeing this is why you see a lot of robotics in Japan, because they're trying to get ahead of it, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. So, I say issues because I want to be intentionally vague. We're going to go into this more in some other episodes of this series. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, when I say issues, I'm usually talking about bad things. And then, of course, you've got neon, which is a noble gas. I bet you didn't know that before the war, a huge percentage of neon was manufactured in Ukraine. And it is made by a sub process of making steel. So actually of making pig iron. Hint, hint. Um, so yeah, and like I said, it's used in the there you go. Ukraine has rare earth elements too. So we've got it's used as a focusing mechanism in the etching process. If you are interested in that, look at ASML. That is their name of their company and their ticker symbol. It's a Dutch country that makes the most advanced semiconductor etching machines. Very expensive stock, but very cool. If you want to look at the technology, it's very cool. I'm a tech geek anyway, so I love that stuff. All right, so we're starting to run out of time. We're gonna hit, yes, ASML, Alpha, Sigma, Mike, Lima. Like I said, the United States, it uses mostly recycled, but it can be ugly. You've got your pig iron, which is that intermediate product. Most countries see that as a national security issue. And evidently the US has not. I think that's beginning to change, but it's going to take some while to revitalize that infrastructure to get that going again. It's kind of like the phosphate mine I was talking about a minute ago. It doesn't happen overnight. None of these changes happen overnight. And I hope somebody somewhere with some power is actually getting deep into this, because we should have already started most of what I'm talking about. And at least some of it we haven't started at all. But it's not like other places really have either, you know? China kind of has, but anyway. And then you got virgin steel, which is more about finished products, things that you see. If it's a piece of steel that you will see, like stainless steel on a refrigerator or a washing machine, or if it's a part on a car that's not plastic that you'll see, you're going to have to use virgin steel, because that's the only way that you can make it look really, really nice. So, for anybody that wants any more information on what I've talked about here is where I get a lot of my information. Peter Zion, these are his 4 books. The Accidental Superpower, which talks about how it's more about Bretton Woods, how what happened. The Absent Superpower, which is about the United States stepping back. Disunited Nations is about deglobalization, and the end of the world is just the beginning is kind of about, well, what's next? He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. He's got a channel on Patreon that you can pay for and get everything about a week early. All the stuff on YouTube's free. I do a lot of YouTube, and it's not scrolling through CRAP. Another guy I look at a lot on YouTube, his name is Joe Brown. He runs a company called Heresy Financial, which does talk about trading and the economics inside trading. And he does have some products that you can buy, but he's got a lot of free stuff on YouTube. Talks a lot about the Fed and economic policy, which is really cool. Others, I follow China Update and Market Update is the same guy on YouTube. Mostly about China is about China, and the market is about global markets, Europe, Asia, North America, South America, mostly. And he's from New Zealand. He lives in China, though, actually. Ryan Macbeth. He's a really cool guy. He's a lot into technology, talks a lot about drones and AI, ex Army NCO, who got his degrees while he was in the Army. He's really interesting take on some of the geopolitical stuff, some of the military stuff. Then there's Money and Macro. This is a guy from, oh, I want to say the Netherlands. I think he's Dutch. Very doesn't have a thick accent. A lot about macroeconomics. Very cool stuff. Andrew Bustamante. Anybody definitely go check him out. Ex CIA field agent. So you want to get a different view on geopolitics? Go look at some of the stuff this guy's talking about. And there's plenty of others out there. You can go find those for sure. And of course, globalization is a fact of life, but I believe we have underestimated its fragility, as I mentioned several times in the slideshow. So there you go. We've got just a few minutes left, so I'll show the old disclaimer one last time, and then if you want to give me a symbol to look at, we'll go look at it and see what we can figure out. We've only got a few minutes, so I'll do two or three, and Brenda's right in there. Bang. Spy, which we all love, looks just like the SPX, right? Very similar. Um, could see that move up into 600. Run to 100 is always an interesting phenomenon that you see. Let's blow this up so you can see it a little bit better. So it chipped away at the ice, as Rob likes to say, at the old 600 level. So that's a good one. Let's take a look at, we'll do 15 minutes. So as you can see, yesterday it was down, it was up, and it finished down-ish, but it was still high, was lower than the day before, but it was high, it was about where it was on Tuesday. Is that Tuesday? Yeah. So yeah, and that's that whole sideways thing. So more difficult to do directional trading, but as far as let's see, uh, 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 oh no, not 1 minute. I want 1 year. So let's do this. I thought I had this on here. Somebody's been messing with my charts. We've got oh, we've got our old Fibonacci for the SPY right there. So we looks like our next level up is going to be at the minus 136, which is 607. If we move down below that zero line at the 50, here, let me, well, I can't blow this out. Um, at the, yeah, there we go, 595, we're going to run into the 8, and then we're going to run into the 21 and the 118. So the downside move is a little bit more restrictive because of that. So maybe look at a more of an upside move. If you get past that 607, you're going to make a run to 619, but watch out for the all-time high at 613. So there you go. For the Qs, let's see. And of course, there we go. I promise I'm almost done, Andrew, I won't keep you here too long. We've got same thing on the Qs, very similar. I'm gonna put it there instead of here. Um, very similar Fibonacci. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere, so not a great grade. Uh, Maybe a retest of 522 and a run up to 535 would be really, really nice for a multiple day move. You might bump into the 8 on the way down though, so you could see that bounce. It may not make it all the way down to the 0. It might bounce off the 8. But for right now, the Qs are kind of in a wait and see as far as a directional trade goes. From let's do this. I'm going to show you something else. So this is the six pack I use for the Hakanashi scalp, which you hear about in Power Hour, which we do in our newly named Inner Circle Trading Laboratory. But what you see, I'm going to look at this 5 minute. What you see is we're going to look at yesterday because it's already done. That's nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's nice. That's nice. Nice. That's awesome. That's pretty good. So you see a lot of smaller moves inside. And that's why I'm a big believer in my daily trading is more about scalping, maybe a day trade. And then I've got my other side where I'm doing my longer term stuff is more about covered call explore. But even that, I'm not doing any position trading right now. The closest thing to a position trade that I'm doing is holding a long dated option as a proxy to the stock so that I can write options against it, which is the diagonals, whether it's a call diagonal or a put diagonal. So that's kind of where I am in my style and risk profile right now is you know my all my cash flow stuff, my covered calls and naked puts and diagonals are more about retirement, and all of my day-to-day stuff is more about scalping, getting in and getting out, bang, bang, bang. So that's me. You do you, I'll do me. What are oh, that's the parabolic SAR. It is an indicator that can be used to identify possible points of um, stop. The SAR stands for stop and reverse. So we're looking for a reversal. It's like every indicator out there. You don't always get it, but see how it comes down and gets close, and then when it flips, it goes in the other direction. So you see a lot of that. I'm using it more for a no-go indicator here, but we won't go too deep into this because this is way beyond trading coach's playbook. But I just wanted to show you that to show you that when you're talking about especially spies, Qs, IWM, diamonds, those are great instruments for day trading and scalping. So definitely things to watch. They can be great for more longer term directional trades, multiple days. I don't know that you would want to get into them real long term unless you are investing in them, which is fine. That's a great way to invest in the market as a whole, which can kind of diversify you automatically, which can be a very good thing. So there you go. All right, that's all I've got for today. Next time I see everyone, which will be in 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to go a little bit deeper into this, but it's not going to take as long. We're going to take some very specific spots of some of the things I've talked about and a few new ones and spend 25 minutes to 30 minutes on them, and we'll have a little bit more time to do what we just finished doing at the end. So there you go. Great. Thank you very much. What are they called again, Norman? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Are you still here? Yeah. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, the lines you were drawing. Oh, the Fibonacci's? What I drew on there was Fibonacci. Oh, thanks, Les. Um, I'm a history buff, so I go when I go deep. Um, but yeah, the lines I was drawing was Fibonacci, Norman. So, all right, I am going to shut this down. Everybody, trade disciplined out there.